Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody's having a beautiful day. I hope you got to wake up next to the person you love. I hope the sun is shining and the birds are singing. I'm so thankful to have such a great guest for you guys today. And I'm gonna introduce to you the one and only Ehren Cruz. He's a man who has an incredible passion for positive change, who cares deeply about creating, transforming trauma into a position of lived experience for individuals, families, and communities. He's an award-winning producer, a high-performance team builder, founder of the SpArc, a groundbreaking coaching approach that utilizes rites of passage, immersive experiences to dramatically elevate awareness, embodiment, and impact. He's a historian and anthropologist. He's certified by CTA, ICF, and probably the most positive, incredible thing to me anyways, that he's a loving husband and a proud father of 3. Ehren, there's way more I could say, but I'm so thankful for thank you for being here today. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing awesome, George. It's an honor to be a part of the True Life Podcast, man. Thank you for having me on. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I was going to, when I thought about doing the intro today, I was like, gosh, there's so much cool stuff in here I could put. But I thought it might really benefit the people if they could hear your origin story about how you kind of came to this path, how you kind of came to become the guy that you are today. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Goodness, I'll probably go back to college in this one then. So
Okay.
I was studying anthropology all throughout college, my college experience. I grew up in New Jersey, a rather urban, fast-paced lifestyle. I had a lot of cool upbringing there with my family and friends. One thing is that I did get exposed to compounds of various forms very early on. It's part of the rave culture, part of the festival music culture. So all those things were kind of very influential for me. But when I started going to school and I graduated Western University, and I then started in my my graduate program. I was in anthropology at the time, and I was looking at South American, Central American, Mexican American, Mexican ancient tradition, looking at these cultures there, civilizations that were utilizing plant medicine compounds, ceremony, sacred ritual. And they were able to form these long-term, like highly symbiotic relationships with the environment around them, cultivating different tribal lineages that were all infused into an epicenter that had advanced astronomy, advanced philosophical underpinnings, archaeology that just blew the mind. And right at the center, Teonactl, flesh of the gods, sitting around. And so I was observing it from more of an ivory tower academic perspective and like, oh, that's very curious, and then also looking at the conquistadors, the missionaries that were coming in, and they persecuted different aspects of their traditions, mostly religious and spiritual traditions. But public enemy number one, Teonactl, flesh of the gods. We do not like plants. We do not like the eating or imbuing or imbibing with plants that were inspiring visions or transcendent awareness of any form or communion with deity or anything like that. So I found that to be really kind of curious. What is it about this ceremonial plant? What is it about the medicine that was so destructive or perceivably so? So I ended up actually at a music festival, I'd say back in 2008. Took a larger than therapeutic dose of LSD at the time. And it really immediately erupted into this state of more of a unified awareness perspective. The Ehren that had to be the intellectual and the funny one and the one that danced a certain way and all these different things, it just started really melting away. It started really dissipating from my existence. And all around me, no matter if I was looking at a girl in a ballerina tutu or a big old strong guy with a guinea tea or whatever it was, everybody, I saw the same soul signature. They want to be cared for, appreciated. They want to be celebrated. They want to be a part of community. But they fundamentally not sure how to go about that. They felt awkward in themselves. They felt very, very sensitive and self-conscious. They weren't sure of what their purpose or who they were claiming to be. And they saw it in my eyes that I saw something there. And, like, oh. And I just kept getting these faces over and over, like, whoa, wow, you're looking at me in an interesting way. But that became an unfolding. I had a transpersonal experience, mythical origins, powerful revelations of natural world breathing, the force around me. Feeling myself as a child of the universe, a him. I didn't even remember my name at a certain point for a good 2 to 3 hours. Just, he that is on the hill with the music, and so it was profound. It was the most transformative experience, I'd say, of my life at the time, like up to this day. And part of it, I recognized, I felt utterly isolated in academia where I didn't have a voice of expression. I handed in my master's thesis and I had 200 citations. And my mentor at the time was like, "You're using too much of your own opinions here, Ehren. You have your own, too many of your own thoughts." I'm like, "My own thoughts? This
How
is
dare
100
you?
pages regurgitating everyone else's thoughts, but that, so I felt repressed there. And, all these different aspects of my life were just like, these aren't lining up. But so there was a big falling out, a big transition there. But also the same token, it was quite terrifying having that type of Gnostic, revelatory, expanded awareness, having nobody that I know that ever had this phenomenon before, outside of biblical texts and of reading on Kundalini awakening. There's certain things that are so esoteric that, I had falling out. I had some narcissism after that. I had some, isolation from others after that. I had a whole bunch of things fell out. And I realized that, like, hey, over time, there needs to be some real care, some real support. There has to be some real devotion to people that are having these spiritual emergency experiences, transforming themselves, but having no landing pad as to how to synthesize this into their life, without just Molotov cocktails everywhere they go, So that's kind of origin story of me, at least having my revelatory awakening through psychedelics. From there, I became an event producer using radical creativity to create and foster experiences. I started using entheogenic sacramentally with ritual and Kabbalism and Hermeticism, and really distilling down a purpose, intention, sitting in there, learning and growing from the muse of the medicine. So it was a big, long trajectory from that path, but that lightning bolt still got a singe on me from that experience there. That's now a part of my purposes in life.
Man, it's such a cool story. And I can tell by the way you describe it, how profound it was. Like, there's certain things that people feel, and it's this weird sort of, I describe it as like the terror before the sacred, because it is so isolating, but you're in the presence of something so beautiful. I know people use the word ineffable all the time, but there's something there that's just, it makes your skin get goosebumps, and you're like, oh, and you're so right, because it's very easy to slip into the holy man syndrome of like, I got to help these people. They don't get it. I feel how sad they are. And then you realize, wait a minute, that's how I feel. I'm the one that's sad. And there's no framework around it, or at least the framework had been isolated from the sacrament for so long. People got the sacrament, they brought it here, and they had no rails to be on. They had no lineage back to the teachers. They had no sacred rites of passage, or they had no elders to show them the way. And I think that while I might be getting ahead of myself here, like, when I hear you explain it and I read the bio, I'm like, this guy gets it. He's had the lived experience. He's felt how isolating it was. And now he's going and trying to help other people by building some rails around it so that they can have their own transformation. And I just want to say thank you. I love that there. But maybe we can jump back a little bit to, so you go from being a producer and figuring out these things. Like, when I say to you rites of passage, like, first off, how do you define that? And how do you become a person who becomes confident to create a rite of passage for somebody else?
That's a great question. Absolutely, George. Ultimately, the concept of initiation, genuine initiation, is largely lost on much of our culture and tradition. Outside of marriage, birth of a child, and even then, it's not even as sanctimonious as one would hope, in that way. But really stepping into a place where your body, your mind, and spirit, your kind of trinity of belief, what you feel, what you think, what you believe, comes into a convergence point, and then it's tested with a true sense of challenge. Can that essence of what you have held as real, can that withstand the burden of a deep, expansive foray into a trial of the soul? Can you actually emerge through that space holding on to those same limitations, beliefs, or paradigms of safety that has been either culturally passed down to you or socially accepted, or peerage or mentorship said this is your parameters of existence? And then you're placed into a circumstance where, is that where they are? Is that who you are? Is that the genuine capacity and nature of your deepest being is within that bubble, within that construct? And that's something that's really within indigenous traditions, within ceremonial traditions, has been something that has been periodically challenged in a kind of a scaffolded way, with great intentionality, with great kind of consideration. Here's wisdom. Here's experiences from those who came before you. Here are those who have endured this test of self. Here are parameters of how they live. Here's what they emanate as beings now that they've experienced this experience. So you're even getting aspects of the signature of what those initiations are typically through your communion in the village or in the tribe or in the community dynamic. Now we're kind of brought into a position where you're not going to get that organic connectivity. You're not going to get that opportunity. So you have to almost extend yourself beyond the known, beyond the comforting realms, and strike out and find in different facets of your life, where are those that can guide a space or a path that can nourish this internal drive for gnosis, for wisdom, yearning that's birthing through me. I know that I'm beyond this particular job. I know that I'm beyond this masculine archetype of the hard work. Like there's more to me. There's depth here, so that's where I feel like from my experience, being deeply involved in the Kabbalistic tradition has been very, very helpful. Because if you look at the Etz Chaim, the tree of life, the 10 Sephiroth of the tree of life, it's a beautiful ancient system, some time of Abraham, but really, since the AD and then the time of 1400 AD was when it really started growing its true roots. But when you look at this from the top down as a creation element, from the essence of omnipresent awareness, comes out from fountain and fountain of complexity, forces and forms, masculine and feminine aspects of creation, until we, the final vessel, absorb that in the kingdom, in earth. But all the potencies all the way back to the omnipresent awareness in its most undisturbed richness and state exist within us. They are birthed through us in this manifested experience. And then moving up the tree to the top, that is the path of initiation to reclaiming, because this world is about free choice, reclaiming our connectivity to these different aspects of creation back into unified awareness in a continuum of peace. So finding that there, I found it to be very, very powerful and instrumental. So earth, first Sephiroth down the bottom. Are you a steward of this world? Are you a steward of your body? Are you connected to those other and respecting of their body? Do you nourish the vessel? Do you understand that you are a living vibration, and that which is within you can only hold the gnosis, the internal wisdom can only hold if the frequency of your body can genuinely maintain that awareness. And then you move up to the mind, the foundation, yesod. We are one step from the foundation. We're one step from a mind. Are you accountable for your thinking? Are you genuinely in alignment with what I think becomes reality? So persistent, thinking about licentious behavior, thinking about the neuroses and the addictions and all that is actually calling that in. The universe doesn't understand negatives. It understands repetition and patterns. So if you're thinking of the same thing, no, all you're saying is yes, 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 because that's what the view of the hologram that you're permusing on and continuously contemplating on is. So second rites of passage initiation on that path is honor your thoughts. They are as important as anything in your life. Thinking about things positively, constructively, creatively, open-endedly can then create openness and abundance in the universe to allow you to then manifest an expanded vision into reality. So these different things that I had learned deeply from that, and as an alchemist as well, which alchemy at the end of the day is your inner conditions. When you transmute your inner conditions to find peace, buoyancy, well-being, vibrancy, then you perceive a world that is of equal frequency to that reality. And if you internally you believe in the potentiality of different interdimensional beings, different connectivity to this world around us, the universe around us, expansive mystical ways, well, then it becomes accessible. It's the biology of belief. That's what we believe is what we are able to then perceive and interface with in our reality. So those two things have allowed me to learn and distill down over a decade of very, very devotional work there, different ways to create paradigms or structures or arcs, as I call them, the SpArc, for people to step into, well, where are your challenge points of your reality? What are you hoping to deepen in those spaces? Utilizing an entheogen with a very, very mindful process to then step into those with intentionality and expand and explore those realities and come back then with a synthesized view of, okay, this is where I thought my limitations are. This is where I've grown into, and now it's time to synthesize myself from a new foundation. So there's a little bit of a roundabout answer there, but that's kind of how I stepped into the work and what has influenced me to be a servant of that type of work.
Would you say that is not only a system that you use for other people, but like that's the same system that you've used for yourself? That's what it sounds like to me. It's like, hey, this is the path that I walked on. Let me show you how to do it. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the thing that's beautiful about it is like, I don't necessarily have to go to people and say,
Right.
okay, time to learn Hebrew.
Yeah,
And here
totally.
is the first entry to the path. Like, it's way more homogenous. Like it's more about, I understand what frequency of lesson you're hoping to commune with. Are you looking for compassionate awareness in your life and having that container for others and starting to lay down that judgment and open up to a sense of acceptance of others on their journey of earnest trying and recalibrating that. Okay, then I understand where that is in my inner framework. And so I can distill down then, okay, here is a pathway of learning, of support, of resources, of challenges, of questions, of reflections, all these different things to incubate on with support over a month or 2 months. And then you come to that crux point of a moment where you're going to step into a journey. And then I can support that. But yeah, through my own experiences in my own particular spiritual path and also cultivating festivals and events where these
Yeah.
are paradigms and containers for ecstasis. They are
Mm.
genuinely made to encapture and enrapture the senses, to create through the confluence of art, music, ceremony, culture, communitas, the bringing together of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Here's an epicenter of radical transformation, and you're seeing it all around you. And we know festivals have plenty of entheogens, it's just part of the fabric of that
Yeah.
culture, that of the nature. So that's something as well that like through over time is creating ecosystems and conditions that help to cultivate this rising sense of growth and rising sense of emergence into one's own initiation.
It's so beautifully put. And I love beginning to touch on this idea of festivals. When I think of a festival, I think of time. And there's one of my favorite authors is Mircea Eliade, and he wrote beautifully about theology and in my opinion, like the psychedelic environment. And one part that I always go to, and what touched upon me with your idea of festivals, is there's different ways we can experience time. And like a festival is like sacred time. If I think about a time where my dad got married, his dad got married. So when I get married, it's almost like we shared that same time. And when you go to a festival, it's like that time kind of stops. If you just think about time in a different way, you are experiencing sacred time with somebody else when you're in a ceremony, because that ceremony has been going on for generations. And now it's your turn to take part in that time. And then the time you go to work is it's a different kind of time. It's almost like you're not really experiencing it. It's not a sacred time. It's just more like time to get up, and you're not really your authentic self during that time. You are the culmination of society's beliefs that are thrust upon you at that time. And when you go to those festivals, you really get the chance to be born into yourself in time. I'm just curious, what's your take on time? Like, have you heard that before? Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. Absolutely. No, I really love that position there because I mean my favorite band from festival, STS9, they are Sound Tribe Sector 9, and there's a day at a time in the Mayan calendar, the one day that's everything stops and we recreate the universe, it's called. And that band plays on that day and they recreate the universe. So it's pretty awesome. So yeah, we are talking about time, and it brings me back also to Jerry said when they play Dark Star, and they're like, hey, Dark Star is always playing. We just tune into it at the sacred time when we're on the stage and we listen for the Dark Star and we translate it to you again and again and again and again. But we're not creating the Dark Star. The Dark Star is, and we decide to step into it together. So that's that element. That's how I always perceive the festivals. This is a training ground. This is an opportunity to step out of the contemporary arc of your life to move into a place where people are deeply intentional about discovering their own radical creative self. They want to learn, they want to dress and how they truly feel, the muse that moves them. They want to listen to that which moves, makes their body move and their eyes tear. They want to learn from elders and yoga teachers and people that are there that can exchange their gifts of what they have to offer. They want to eat some foods and sit with their friends and contemplate life. But it's in its own removed, times system that's there. You nourish, you discover, you explore, and then you go back in. Yeah, now not all festivals are created equal in that intentionality. I must say, Coachella versus your Envision in Costa Rica or something. No, very, very different gatherings. But at the same time, if you go back to time immemorial, the festivals was the time of the great gathering, of the great exchange, where all different leaders, all different spiritual teachers, all different musicians, artists would come together and say, hey, this is what we have up to now. Here is our offering of what we've learned now. What's next? Can we decide on that? Can we choose what that is? So people always just talk about festivals and escapism. I'm like, no, train, learn, grow, soak it in. Then when you reinsert back into contemporary movement of society, you have a certain glow, you have a certain perspective, you have more lenses, more facets of the diamond to work from in your own sense of self. And people feel that. They start drawing into the what you're cultivating inside of, like, you seem lighter, brighter, excited. Tell me about that. Tell me, where's that? And then they start thinking, where's that crack in my life? Where's that place that I can go to, my refuge, my sanctuary, my place of distillation of time where I can reinvent or reinvigorate and step back in. Absolutely.
It's beautiful said. What is that thing that people feel like when you're around someone that's full of spirit, whether it's at a festival or sometimes you sit down to a conversation, you're like, wow, I feel this thing, like, and it's almost alien a little bit, because maybe it's because we haven't felt it in a long time. Maybe we never cultivated it ourselves, or maybe it is alien. I don't know. But how do you explain that feeling? You touched upon it in that last that conversation, that point that you had, but how do you explain that feeling? What is that thing that we share between us?
Well, it's interesting. So the idea of communitas, that word is a Greek word, and it is the essence of spirit that's connected when people come together in honesty and an honest exchange. So like when you are together with somebody, so first, you have a witnessing, you have a witnessing of another. They're perceiving, something that you're hoping to orate, generate, offer. And that creates a potency because there's a witness, an exchange, a connectivity there. And then you're kind of co-painting a creative potential there. Now, there's something else, though, that I think you're speaking toward. And that is, that is where someone is holding a frequency of presence and a frequency of surrender into their life experience, where they can genuinely be in trust of letting you feel their full self. And that's something that really happens sometimes powerfully over the 2 or 3 days of a festival, where someone softens and sees so much and smiles and laughs so much. You're just like, I don't got any mask here. Like I am just touched, I am just where I'm at, and I'm ready to connect with you. And here we go. And for those that cultivate this in lifestyle, I'm a devotee in lifestyle. Like to cultivate this space of deep surrender, deep trust, deep faith, and the ability to navigate from an intuitive resonance field in life. I have a task list like everybody else, and I have things that I'm accomplishing. But when I show up for the thing, all the expectations really go out the window. Like, we are in a place of present creativity, where I'm really kind of in love with the moment of the space. And so I'm giving myself to offer in devotion to this moment, what it can be. And when you feel that with another person, they're not like, oh, I got a 10 o'clock and, this is interesting, but I kind of want to check my phone because this is not as, like there's a kind of things like that going on. Then that frequency of presence shifts a lot. But when you can sit with somebody in their heart, that's something that really calls them home. Beyond what they say, it's what they feel in that sense of presence. And that really can do more across political divides, social divides, all those things. It's that sense of emanation that can really bring people in, because it's a signature they recognize, even if they don't hold. It's like, wait a second, I know that. That feels like home. That feels, what is that? And that really calls people in closer. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you put it that way. When I think of surrender and I think of spirit, I often think of the word sacrifice that kind of follows that. And it seems to me that this word sacrifice seems to be all over the ideas of spirituality or sometimes festivals, but rites of passage. It's almost like, and it's so broad because sometimes you're sacrificing a part of yourself. Sometimes people that are healing their trauma are trying to work past things that they have sacrificed. Sometimes we look at the people that we lost as a sacrifice. What do you think is the relationship between sacrifice and spirituality? I know it's kind of a broad question, but you can take it any angle you like.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think surrender means two different things in the East and West. Is kind of where I think I want to start. That it's like in the West, when you consider surrender, you're considering almost the relinquishing of power. Like, lay down your arms. You're now under the subjugation or control of an other, whatever that be. Like, surrender, give it up. In the East, it's like surrender means like I am surrendering my perception of control. Like my assumption of control is now surrendered. I am not in control. I am surrendering to the fact that something greater than that is moving through the vessel and through creation is actually in the reins. And so my ability to have to understand everything or control everything or even need to know is let go, and for some reason, something really powerful happens when you let go in that way. Then you start to understand more than the mind can actually necessarily encapsulate or maybe equally partition off and say, this is my working knowledge of, but there's a sense of knowingness or understanding that brings a peace because you let go of a reins of something that never had reins of to begin with. Now, that can be perceived of a sacrifice. I am sacrificing my control over these things, or am I sacrificing my ability to have surety over that this relationship works like this, and this person is going to be there for me like this, and this is how my house has to be run to be right. And you're like, and if you let go of that, you open your hands all and say, I am now surrendering and honoring that this can all change. We are rivers. We're in flow with life. We are in continuous transformation. By thinking that anything is held that is uniquely ours, that usually blows up in one way or another. So the sacrifice is almost an assumption of something you never had to begin with.
That's so true.
You're sacrificing something that wasn't even yours to even sacrifice most of the time, or you're considering that to begin with. So it's really tricky how that navigates. Now, I can say that what you can be devotional discipline with is then you start to juxtapose, well, am I sacrificing the double fudge sundae because I have a freedom to eat the double fudge sundae? Am I sacrificing 6 hours of my favorite sitcom because I can do what I want, and I can have that environment thing. But then you look at, well, is freedom doing everything you want, or is freedom actually honoring the gift and expanding, exploring through it, exploring through the gift, exploring through what you hold, exploring through what you came here to accomplish, so it's a really interesting thing because, some places, I do sometimes sacrifice some of the things that I would like. I would say I put it maybe in that mindset, but then I realized it's like, well, actually, though, when I engage with the thing, because mine always tries to tell you, all you want to do is be comfortable. You just want to be comfortable, Ehren, just chill. Like, of course. But then once you start chill, like, I don't want to chill. I never really just want to chill. What are you talking about, mind? What are you talking about? Let's get back to it, So it's so funny, though. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that there is value to looking at things and saying what is in deepest alignment genuinely and moving those directions. Because a lot of times people come into psychedelic journeys for healing. They're like, I want to get rid of these patterns and habits and ways of being that I want to let go of. I want to almost sacrifice them up, put them back into the earth, for fertilizer, create the space, and then reconnect with more things there. And so it depends how you use that terminology. But I would say, keeping the mindset that we are not necessarily always in control or holding on to things to let them go. We can choose what aligns, what resonates. We can look at the view of what our path would be with one way or another. But I think more of it is accepting more as opposed to losing more, accepting that you're more. Flip that, invert that. Actually, can you expand to the greatness you are? Can you spread those wings to the awesomeness you can create and keep widening that? We don't need to get rid of too much all the time, but we need to accept more, I think, in our lives.
That's really well said. I love the fact that you started off by defining the terms from two different angles. It seems that happens a lot. We lose a lot in translation, especially when we're coming together from different cultures or different continents. Words like discipline, sacrifice, surrender. It's very easy for two people to go down two different paths right when they first meet and they start using this shared terminology with different meanings like that.
Yeah.
And, when I think about that, when we stay on the topic of language for a moment, and I tie in the idea of festivals, one of the most poetic and romantic things I always think about is the Eleusinian mysteries. I love to read about that and how, emperors would go with slaves and everybody had the right to go to this festival. And in my mind, I've created this idea of an amphitheater where you're sitting around with people and you've taken some sort of, heightening awareness, heightening substance. And you're watching Persephone and Demeter and this child dies. And even though there's no words exchanged, I can look over at you, a stranger that I don't know, and I have goosebumps and you have goosebumps. And we see the same thing, man, for the first time in our lives. We're seeing it together. And that bonds us in a way that no words can. And I'm wondering, is it seems to me like I think that that's what you're doing. And that's why I'm so stoked to get to see and talk to you, is because I've read about what you're doing and I automatically equated it with my vision of what's happening there. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what you're doing in ceremonies. But before we get there, maybe you could address the idea of the felt presence of the other and observing something together. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that you brought up the Eleusinian Mysteries.
Yeah, me
That is
too.
the penultimate ceremonial container of rites of passage for an entire civilization for
Yeah.
2,000 years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, and in that way too, two things. It looks at the power of intentional craft around a container, how profound that can be. As Socrates had shared, I believe, is like, it wasn't philosophy or the theology or democracy or warfare, Perez. It was the Eleusinian Mysteries, which is the heart of Athenian Greece. Like, you make a festival so good that they say that, like, that's the power of what these containers hold. Absolutely. And you then think about, you're going into an initiatory theater. You're going in there with all walks of life, and they have the secret of immortality. And it's held so tight-lipped that, the penalty is death outside of this theater, like literally to share what is revealed. So they go in, they imbibe on the kukion, they have this profound vision, elevated experience of the ceremonial theater of acting out creation. And as you're saying there is something to be said, and great shows, contemporary great shows, artists do this as well, is they create an archetypal experience that is so composite of all these motifs of death and rebirth, of revelation of the divine relationship, of the inward growth or gnosis of the self, of the phoenix death, like all these things are brought to the fore so pronouncedly that everybody there starts to almost attune to the muse that's being presented, this voice, this logos that is there. And in their own world, they're going through a scenario of how they culturally or how they can interpret that message in them. And they might be doing it in their mind with friends and loved ones, or they may be doing it, if there's a mystic mind out there, with angels and demons, or with mythological beings or deities or fae, or depending on what your orientation is, you're reenacting the logos or the muse presented in your own way. So that it leaves room for everybody to be simultaneously initiated in their own experience with a frequency that is similar. Now, everybody has the same exact vision, but they have a sense of what that narrative is. It's drawing them inward. They're considering things. There's lamentation in the music. Oh, it's bringing them to a place of heartfelt crisis and nostalgia. Then it rises up into a bittersweet, and they remember their dear friends and allies along the way. And then it triumphantly peaks, and they're like, I am an avatar, and I am reborn. I'm ready to be here, and so you could hear that in the muse of the entire experience. And so that way of creating that, I think, is profound. It's as old as time. It's our way to, how do we explain these cycles of civilization and withstand the dusty pages that are blown away. We create this ceremonial theater, and we create these situations. And that's what I was always doing as a festival producer, is like, how can I bring in these different traditions, frame them in a flow across the schedule? 4 stages are doing this at all times, and then the parade goes off and the fireworks peak, and this person plays jazz and this person plays funk, and all of a sudden there's like a moment that's like a crackle occurs, and it's like you can feel the sense of release. Everyone's like, I'm no longer tracking this. I am just present, and I am in the flow. Like, I am now riding the wave of sensation of what the magic is here, and I'm listening to my inner self on how to tune and navigate. So whether that's happening in an individual journey, in a larger ecstatic experience, there's that moment of surrender once again, as trust in that innate capacity we have to adapt and shift and flow, and birthing into something greater that you stepped into and on the front end.
I think one thing that is amazing that you have probably experienced that most people haven't, and I'm sure everybody has their own unique experiences, but I want to just throw this out at you. You get to experience it on a level that's almost third person, because you're a person that's facilitating it, you're participating in it, and you're also watching it. Like, what is that like?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I think makes the most powerful. So I could even shift this a little bit into a ceremonial cultivation and
Yeah.
curation, because I think that's where it really becomes even more pronounced. You know,
Yeah.
from the festival perspective, that's so true. I mean, I have been touched deeply by festivals to a
Yeah.
place where, and I've taken aspects of like, that's amazing. Let's bring that, and then cultivate it into my version of this alchemical stew that is this iteration of a
Right.
festival. And as I'm exploring that, and I'm thinking about, wow, people are moving through this experience. Where are they going to go next? What can happen? How can I position things to
Right.
enliven and enrich and bring this to a fore?
Right.
Now, that really, I think, happens experientially in the ceremonial container into an entirely other dynamic, because there's still, even in a festival environment, there's a lot of outliers, a lot of erroneous things that can happen. That's why it's a little Wild West. It's
Right.
not for everybody. I don't go across saying that everybody should do psychedelics into a festival. It is an intense environment. It's a frontier. You have to take a lot of discretion over self, safety around the people that you're with, honoring of the true needs of the body in extraneous environments. Like, there's a lot of things to consider when moving into that space to ensure that you are hale and whole to have that type of experience. But in a ceremonial framework of a container, this is something that, like, when I started moving into the microcosm of crafting these experiences, I really feel the potency of what you're talking about there. It's like, from my experiences of however many journeys I've had with many, many compounds, served by beautiful facilitators, and sometimes rogue and on my own and doing my own initiations, some of which that I felt were wise at the time, and some were not, were actually kind of disruptive and fracturing, and had to pick myself up in pieces, and so did my family for a little bit, like, so things like that have occurred. But when I'm now cultivating a deeply intentional ceremonial container, and I'm looking at the rhythm of someone's life that I'm working with together, and we're asking these deep questions about their own family, relationships, trauma, their belief structures, where they're hoping to expand, what they're wanting to let go of, who they see themselves as truly being. And I'm synthesizing this in my mind, and I'm looking at my ceremonial dynamic. I'm looking at my instruments, and I use a lot of sacred fragrances: olibanum, frankincense, cedar, myrrh. Cedar smell, that's like the fresh forest on a beautiful day. Frankincense, it's like the sun shining on a beautiful morning. Like, thinking about what are the conditions with medicine bowl and rattle and drum and rain stick and all these things that I can create for an ecosystem to meet them in their odyssey of their internal journey as an ally, create texture, create an artistry in this experience that really activates their inner muse, that gets their deep, innocent curiosity alive. And that sense of things have to be a certain way to let go, to fade a little bit. And then create an architecture through a very carefully curated soundtrack of music and empowering language. And this thing, when you're very, very open and susceptible, very, very considerate of when you say things and why and how to someone that's in a particular state. So understanding where there's empowering language or an alliance language that's set in, and different things in that condition that help to nurture a greater potential for that breakthrough, for that opportunity to have that revelation experience. So that's where I've really come to understand the power of the container. Now, I definitely honor the therapeutic approach in which there is a clinical setting and there's safety there and there's a protocol. I mean, I think ethically, it's a very, very well done orchestrated MAPS protocol. Others that are coming online with really solid protocols, I really appreciate that. The one component I think that there is missing from that, and it's not by fault of anyone else, because it's a difficult skill to cultivate at the end of the day, is the artistry of a genuine ceremonial facilitator that is listening to the language of the song being sung in a journey, and is understanding, how do I then create different conditions with infusing my own craft and my own deep sense of knowing of where they are. I could feel somebody and they're like, oh, they're in the perinatal rebirth right now, I can, and here we go. How do I welcome them in with solidarity and truth and trust and safety? What do I need to do that? Like, these different things, I think, are some things that are really powerful and vibrant in the ceremonial container that is unique to that particular container, that really can help work people through the deeper transpersonal rites of passage states into a framework of embodiment that can be really quite profound. So that's the space that I found to be a condition that I'm really juiced in right now, where I'm working toward. Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating to think about. Like, how do you, a lot of the times lived experience is in fact the best teacher. And I'm wondering, like, that's such a powerful position to be in. And it requires a lot of responsibility to be that person, because there's a lot of temptation there. There's a lot of intoxication there.
Yeah.
Just being that in that presence, like, it's a lot of responsibility. How have you learned to deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, that's one of the things that I think is the most challenging and precarious nature of that ceremonial dynamic. You have someone there that is incredibly vulnerable in an incredibly intimate position. They're raw, they're open, sometimes disoriented, in different ways, and as they're trying to navigate through what their belief is and where they are. And you then have such a sacred, I think, space of, can you respect the depth of what that is? Now, I think from my perspective, that's what makes the experiential psychedelic experience absolute essential. For people that think that they can hold this space and they have not gone through their own deep work, I don't even know what to tell you. Like, I don't even know how to begin that conversation, because you can't be on going through somewhere and be like, oh, I think they're on perinatal matrix 3. I think I've read this in page 86 of Way of Psychonaut. Hold on a second here. I gotta see what I'm gonna do. Like, you have to feel the gravity of how important that is. Even if you haven't gone through all those initiation spaces, the seriousness, the subtle nature of care, the compassion, it has to be genuine. It has to touch you to feel like I want to hold that space. Now, on the second half of that is, when you're looking at the ability to really process through what people are moving through, it's a lot. I live in the alchemical kitchen all the time, and it's not an easy life. It's not something that doing sessions twice a week for a year, it's a lot. People train for 3 months or 6 months to just get ready to go with you for a day when you're doing it twice in a week, and so it is a lifestyle. It's a lot. What has come to firm solidity for me is the 4 agreements are very, very important for me. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the 4 agreements. Toltec wisdom, at the end of the day, is that impeccability with who I am, or at least a wild earnestness to be there, in that place, not making assumptions about anybody's path, and leaving judgment and checking it at the door. I have had people that have been Baptist, Bible Belt, 70-something-year-old come in and have a beautiful, enriched, mystical, profound experience that challenges what they've ever thought and you would never think is possible. But if you held a certain prescriptive analysis of who they are and the type of ceremony you had to hold because it's them, and not giving them the full bandwidth of what you can do because whatever that is, then it wouldn't have allowed that opportunity to occur. It wouldn't have allowed that blossoming. So not making assumptions about others is incredibly important. That not personalizing things, that's probably the triple underline. When people are going through it, it's not about me. They could get upset. They could say all kinds of things. They could, they could have a full regressed experience of a rape. I mean, that has actually happened to me before. Talk about intensity, when you're in there, someone looking at you like, oh my God, are you going to do what you think you're going to do? And then you have to hold the inner stoicism and ambiance of respect and dignity and ethics and clarity that is absolutely not you are. And in fact, actually support them in alleviating and diffusing that energy. I mean, these are circumstances that are quite pronounced. And as a servant in the space, and also as a person that has to genuinely empathize with the gravity of what they're going through, that's where you have to have a code. You have to have an ethical code that you live by in your life, in your own progression, and in how you serve in that space, and have it be as infallible as possible. Because when people are going through experience, there's no real sense of how deep, what lane that's going to take. And, if it's an inner child and they regress to a 2 or 3-year-old and they're literally like a toddler over there, can you be kind and quiet and simple enough that little 3-year-old feels safe? You can't be discerning and this has to. No, you have to be there like the kids in the room, and the kids in the room. And this is the first time the kid's been in the room for 30 years. So if you're not in a place of innocently holding and honoring that little boy or that little girl, it's going to run back. It's going to go back in there, and they're going to have to, try again 10 years from now to see if they could coax it back out again. So these things are so powerful and so sensitive. So that ethical code and living by those agreements for me has allowed me to live in that condition where I could feel safe and solid and confident to hold that space.
Yeah, those are some really valid points that, a lot of people get to see transformation from the outside, or sometimes they get to have their own transformational experience. But it's unique to get to hear somebody's point of view who is in the room with the transitional experience from different kind of mindsets. And, I heard an interesting interview a while back between Terrence McKenna and Ram Dass. And Terrence asked a question to Ram Dass, and I'm going to ask to you. And that question is, how do you like having this rap put on you? Like, I mean, are you always the facilitator? I mean, as you continue to do what you're doing and you help a lot of people, but people don't see you as an individual, all of a sudden they see this master of ceremonies. How do you like that? Is that something that is difficult to deal with, or is it something that you're always working on, or how do you like people putting that on you?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question. Like, I think for me, a couple things here that I think is important. One is that I do perceive, after being in so much ceremony, and that life is a genuine ceremony. Like, for me, there's not really a stop and start to the continuum of what that is for me. Trying my best to acknowledge that we are always in a sacred space. We are always exchanging energy, ideas, insights, emotion. We're always learning and growing. We're actually, in fact, that is the only constant, that there is. And you could either perceive that as being a happening, that's just a happening without, purpose or intent or fuel in the fire of what that is. Or you can embrace that as that this is an important exchange. This is a sacred exchange, and we're here for a reason. And I'm not quite sure why you've intersected with me today, but if I can make this 2 or 3 minutes valuable, by being honest and being present, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I think. So that perspective of me, I feel very much, and I guess in the Ram Dass sense, is the devotion to that aspect of my life, I feel like is infused to something I can't turn on and off. It's just something that I have a deep love for, a consideration for. And when I move into a formalized aspect of the ceremony, it's a step of like breathing, it's another step of breathing fresh air, changing the certain kind of going into it. Now, one thing I can say on the larger scope of that is, though, that like I still have an amazing experiential time in my life, though. I'm not an ascetic, I'm not, I'm not completely censured in my own experiential awareness. I love still going to shows and having experiences. I love connecting with my wife is, she's an amazing avatar of a person herself. She works as the vice president for American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. And she's a badass DJ and rides a trike and and navigates life on a frontier of her own like expression. That's deeply inspiring. And I love that. I love when people can, if you're a pirate, then you're an excellent pirate. And you're, whatever you are, if that's authentic to you and you express it and you do it in a way that respects and honors others, we have a consciousness to explore for a reason. We're actually starting to acknowledge or reconnect with that side of ourselves, that there's inner navigators as much as outer navigators. And that's important for us to discover new ideas and new things. So I do live still a life that I consider a lot of fun and really beautiful and very, very joyous. And I'm still not going to break my code in that process. And I think that's what, even where it's more important. If I'm in the middle of a rapturous environment, ecstatic environment, people trying to bend things, I'm like, I'm super good, man. Thank you and much love. That actually is doing more work right there. Like, wow, like in this moment where it's easy and no one would care and you could do what you want, you still choose to do this. And that creates a condition that reaffirms the value in there. So I think that for me, like the rap is I'm Ehren in all the ways I can. But I can't, I'm not turning it off anymore. I'm just, I'm going to live it, and how that is.
That's a good answer. I like that. As I've been very fortunate too, Ehren, in my life. I've been getting to speak to so many cool people, and it's given me this sort of, standing on the foothill in the mountain of dreams, just getting to participate in some and listen to other people. And it just seemed like there's this new sort of spiritual awakening. And on some level, it's so beautiful and so profound and has so much opportunity. But then when I turn my head a little bit and I look over to this next valley, there's some naysayers that are like, oh man, this is very dangerous. Like, we got here, this is where we got in the 60s. And then we had Jim Jones and Charles Manson and stuff like that. What do you say to the people that are saying, look, this is dangerous and there will be another Manson coming up? And there are these naysayers. What would you tell people that are in that camp?
That's a really great conversation here. I talked about Michael Garfield on Future Fossils podcast as well. He's he's kind of really wanting to explore this frontier. Is like, what happens if there's radical taking the muzzle off of consciousness exploration, like collectively, like what happens there? It's like, oof, that is a heavy lift. He's like, in many ways, I do feel that we'd have to go through a collective infancy where mistakes are made and consideration, things are had, the done that aren't necessarily aligned with the human culture of inherent kindness and equanimity that we all hope is there, and there being an adolescent phase. But I think in many ways, given the nature, I feel like inherently of the natural plant that has these aspects within it, an intelligence that is within it, that often draws us into looking at the dissonance or looking at that which is not settled or aligned or what that is, and trying to reconcile that. Whether it's the composting mushrooms coming through the body and looking for the detritus, because that's what mushrooms do. They're looking for what needs to shake out and go back into the earth and regenerate itself, or the ayahuasca, the vine that's moving through the body and exploring where are there parts of your code that are no longer active, to you recognizing you are a child of this world. You are living part of mother. Can you embrace her once again? I think there's things inside of that draw us into those places. Now, are there those that are going to, because of their own arc of choices and karmic cycle, make poor decisions? I do think so, but they tend to isolate and sift themselves out early on. And in some ways too, I can share, even from my past experience, those are often pathways or lessons toward greater healing. Inevitably, it might be a messier path and things go atrocities, but I'm also not here to say, what exactly is the right thing for even everyone to do in their own path of healing. Like sometimes you have to split the ground and to crack the self and let the light in, so there's a lot there. But I think at the end of the day, when this conversation is moving forward, is, can you trust us to be our full selves? We have systematically compartmentalized our psyche to a digestible, comfortable, consistent, and controlled space that has caused mania and psychosis collectively all around the world, because people do not feel like they can express themselves safely, do not even know how to. They have this deep yearning for a sense of interconnection that they don't even know where it is. They have the Wedigo, the material man disease, as the indigenous say, where everything external is supposed to feed and satiate some sense of value, and it's not touching it, and they don't know where that void is even there. So where that needs to go is inside, dig deeper, learn more, expand, grow inside there. Not everyone's going to make it, not everyone's going to find their centerpiece in that, but I feel a hell of a lot more people will, and a lot more with that radical creativity that will come from that, will be able to create systems way outside of the box and containers for working together proactively with people to support these revelations. Because right now our entire mental health system is reactive. So that's another thing too, moving into the proactive and anticipating that renaissance would be a lot more of a vibrant, I think, mindset than just seeing what might happen and reacting to it.
Yeah, it seems that idea of reaction is a flawed bug in the system that has been keeping us from being proactive, which brings me to this idea of, when you look at this sort of psychedelic renaissance that's moving forward, sometimes I see it as a high tide. Like sometimes the people who do mushrooms, like myself included, sometimes it comes in waves, and I think about these waves of energy, and I kind of sometimes I see what's happening now is like the second wave from the 60s, and it's getting higher. But other times I think to myself, wait a minute, maybe this is a tsunami coming in and just clearing everything out. Do you think it's more of a tsunami, or is it more of a high tide?
That's a I love your analogies. These are great, man.
Thank you.
Awesome, George. I think ultimately right now we're looking at a critical mass moment in our existence. Like 60s, I think were really important to re-energize a sense of that we are more than this structured person. Like that was the first real break out of that. Start spiritual exploration, re-engaging with the plants, re-engaging with music and culture, reconnecting with the self as like again, I'm a family member to society and humanity. The colors, these different boundaries they tried to place upon us, they're amorphous at best, and they're actually not honoring of the gravity of us being a human relationship and family. So I think that Renaissance really kind of rekindled that movement, and being so frontier and novel and expansive at the time, there was a sense of like, well, where does that all land? How does that integrate? And I think that was the integration consideration now is at an entirely other pronounced level, I think, than it was then. Before then, it was just turning on and tuning in and exploring and expanding. But there wasn't ever the question about, well, what about when you start to regulate back to an equilibrium? Well, what do you do every day? So it was so Renaissance-y in the kind of explosive dynamic that no one thought about that recalibration. Now, I think because of our lesson through there, it's a lot more, hey, this is a catalyst. It's not all about the fireworks. It's not all about, hey, I'm going to go in and just have this radical experience and keep radically experiencing like all things. It's like, no, I'm going to go in and explore and expand and grow and learn and let go and all these important things. But it's really about then, how do I enter back in? How do I go back to my family, my career, my community, my profession? Like, how do I step back in there in a way that this experience informs impact? It allows me to now be more generative, more, gracious and peaceful and all these things that I feel because of an experience, because I want to live well, not I just want to, ride the purple lightning all the time. So I think that's where I think the movement is moving, is like, we've watched it happen in different iterations. And now we're coming to a place where we want to elevate our collective consideration of who we are as people to a new paradigm. And that's where I feel like the tsunami effect is actually kind of more accurate, because no one wants to land in the same position. Like, ultimately, we're all stretching and we're not exactly sure where this is landing, but we're looking at, the climate crisis, and we're looking at mental health crisis, and we're looking at political insanity and all these different things transpiring. It's like, we can't even land near where we are. So let's keep stretching and figure this out on the fly at the power, at the speed of dream together in this experience, so that then when we essentially find that recentering, our normative frame of reference is in a new paradigm. And so I think that's the yearning, that's the deep call of everyone. Whether or not we're going to strive and make that happen, there's I think there's a lot of momentum in that space. But I just know that at this point, I find it to be the counterpoint to a lot of the dystopia we're experiencing out there, is this renaissance in awareness that the psychedelics is helping to really engender, cultivate, and steward in many ways.
Yeah, that's really well put. I heard the wave of the 60s told to me in a story, and I want to tell that story to you. Are you okay on time? Like, I know I'm bringing you an hour. Okay, good. Because I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of our conversation here. So I was told the story of the 60s in like this cool story, and it's a short story. I'll share it with you, and then I want to get your opinion to see if you think it mirrors what happened in the 60s. And I only know what I've read. I'm 48, so I wasn't alive, but it was told to me this way. Imagine a warmongering general in the Far East, and he is going from town to town conquering, and he's extremely brutal. And the only people that put up a fight to him and his army are the people of faith, are like the monks. And so he makes a point that every town he goes to just slaughter the monks in a way that is heinous. And by the time he makes his way 3/4 of the way through the country, he comes up on this small town where he sees the leaders of that town, and they welcome him and they say, "Oh, your mighty warlord, all of the monks have fled into the hills except for one." The warlord is furious. He said, "Where is this monk?" They're, "Oh, he's in the ashram right around the corner." So the warlord, boom, opens the doors, and there's a monk just standing there. And the warlord, just rage in his eyes, walks up to the monk and he says, "Don't you know who I am? I could have my sword run through your belly without blinking an eye." And the monk just says, "And don't you know who I am? I am the guy that could have your sword run through my belly without blinking an eye." And the moral of the story is that when the people came, when the powers came for the people in the 60s, they ran for the hills. And they were like, you could die during this game. And the amount of power, the amount of establishment power overpowered the people that were there to fight. And I'm
Mm.
wondering, is that something that could happen now? Like, I see the money flowing into psychedelics. I see the ideas of patents beginning to take shape, and I can see the almost the infighting a little bit in the psychedelic community. And I'm wondering if that's a possibility. Are we going to be the monk that stands there and says, "Don't you know who I am"? I'm hopeful that we will be.
Man, epic story.
Yeah, right? Is that a good one?
Really good. Yeah. You know, I hope to think that we can. And the reason being is that like it matters so much now.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that the crisis is so blaring and in the face that it's like,
Yeah.
you know, where do you need to look to see if we need to change? Like what part of any part of what we're doing here is actually working? You know, like, and you know, like if you, there's not any gravity toward any argument that the system is designed and working as it should be. You know, whether you're looking at icons, whether you're looking at athletes, whether you're looking at, you know, any component of this entire system is fractured, and it's causing so much distress. And so at this point, standing in the center is saying, no, we need to have radical change. We need to make sure that there are alternative means to live and that you have to know about them. You can't just run, and that's where the festivals and the dead and all these cultures are. It's like you have to run to the heels to find yourself. Like,
Yeah.
and you have to find yourself, you know, in non-optimal conditions, you know, one flip-flop still on and broken 3 days later because you didn't pack enough water, because you didn't consider things like all these things happen. And then you can maybe limp your way back to society, try to figure it out. It's like that doesn't work anymore all the time. We have to also sit in the belly of it all and say, these are alternative ways to do this. We're not just a bunch of, wild primal people that are trying to tell you to change the world. No, we're actually living sustainably. You know, when I came out of the psychedelic closet in 2020 on a Facebook, LinkedIn, all the things, I was like, hey, y'all, you know what I've been doing with all these cool events and all these things I've been creating? And I got 3 daughters and, you know, the family that you know and love, the Cruzes. I've been doing psychedelics for 12 years. It's amazing. It has changed my life in every single way. It is something that I feel can be a beautiful catalyst for change for those that are serious about growth and that are doing it in a way of deep intention and consideration. Like, and I came out, and I was at the time, I never sweat so much in my life hitting the enter button. I was a full body sweat. I was, you know, like, and getting out there, person after person after person was like, thank you for standing up and speaking your truth. And I know you're not just, a radical, whatever, you know, losing it. Like, we know you've been around for a long time. You've done some things that are really sweet for our family, and they've grown up with you and whatnot. And so that was super empowering to feel the energy of that, because I do feel that we are coming at a place where people want innovative avenues to explore. They want different ways to experience things. And they know that that SSRIs, the SNRIs, the talk therapy, all these different things are just not hitting the heart of the true of that true loss that's just being felt there. So I think at this point, because we have the research is so deeply well established and so, you know, consistently over and over again, deeply affirmed on the efficacy of psychedelics and PTSD and complex PTSD and anxiety and you know, all those different things that are coming forward. And then you have a real strong culture of people that have been transforming through music and arts and culture for a very, very long time. And you look out there and say, who's a Grateful Dead head? Your lawyer, your police officer, your mayor, you know, so people can be in psychedelic culture and live well and have a great, sustainable, accountable lifestyle. You know, so I think a lot of those isms, taboos, stigmas, they're just starting to wash away. And people are just like, well, what genuinely works and what is actually showing up for others? You know, people like Heroic Hearts coming out there and helping our veterans with amazing projects right now that is just showing people, it's like, it doesn't matter, red, blue, you know, if you're a survivor of this, like, you're welcome and this can change things. You know, I just see so much of that happening, so many lenses and iterations that I feel like that Buddha has a group in the room, not just even a solo at this point of people willing to stand up for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you put it that way. I do think that people being comfortable about talking about what's changed their life in a positive way, it's so fascinating to me that like that can be stigmatized. Like, here's this thing that helped you. Like, why is there this negative cloud just hanging over it? And you know, and then as soon as I think about that, I begin to think about why we've taken ceremonies out of childhood. Like, it's almost like, like, I guess these are two different questions, but the second question seems more interesting at this point for me. So at least in my life, I didn't have a bar mitzvah. My sister didn't have a quinceañera. And these are just echoes of what's left of that institutions.
Yeah.
Why do you see it maybe reemerging, this idea of ceremonies for childhood? And why do you think they were taken out of the education system?
Well, I mean, I think it wasn't even like a strategic decision.
Right.
It's like when you get into a position where the emphasis around life gets really kind of compartmentalized into material value and status and these different things, it starts moving away from experiences. That marked experiences create these moments, these kind of passages, and then when you have them, you are celebrated and ushered into a new way. And I just think over time it was like, well, those experiences are fun, but they lost their sense of purpose, the why that people would do these things, because the culture and the emphasis on materials or whatever necessarily that driving industrial cultural complex is, just overemphasize any need for demarcation of all these considered minor aspects of growth throughout people's lives. And then the how to even do that started to lose. You go back 3 or 4 generations and, you have all these different cool rites of passage and ways holidays were done. I even know my cousins and grandparents, older growing up, and Puerto Rican Christmas, it was very different. Three Kings Day, like there was a way that they did things that had this like mystical quality to it that over time, you just lose the gravity of that from generation to generation because it's not perceived as important or central to the current culture. So I think paradigm wise, that's what we lost. In this contemporary paradigm, it's like, why celebrate the small things when at the end of the day, it's about getting them into this lane and this seat in the bus and getting this particular figure and this particular lifestyle. And so they're looking for more homogenization as opposed to radical explosion of that individual into whoever they are, and that's part of the mindset of the indigenous of past civilizations is, who is this young deity in form here that has come to grace this planet? What are their profound gifts of awareness and artistries and hunting skill? Like, what is it that they have inside to gift our society? Let's put them through some challenges. Let's put them through some experiences that maybe that side of them will awaken to us. And then they will be a leader like this, or they will support this part of our community, or they will inform our tribe from their unique wisdom they acquire on this trail. Like, so it was much more looking at an individual with this question of, how can I accelerate them into being the best them they can be? And now the paradigm is, how can I make them fit into the paradigm that might make the most money and do the most things, for us, or for the whatever that is, whatever the beast is, that whole situation is, So I think that's kind of where that shift has come. But I feel like that's where the yearning of people feel incomplete when they get to certain parts of life. We're like, this can't be it. This can't be it. There's much more to me and my expression, and here I am at the desk, and that's what happens.
Yeah, that's really well said. When you start looking at the way we treat our kids like Pavlovian dogs with bells and whistles and cookie cutter jobs and obedient workers, and don't ask that question why. That's a dangerous question. Just do it. Just read this, okay? Read. Yes. Why don't you just learn from everybody else's experiences and don't have them yourself? Like, it's so sad to me. But on one level, it's sad. But on another level, this is where I begin to see the high tide idea coming back. Like, it's our opportunity to get to rediscover the how, and even reinvent the how some way. And in reinventing the how, we're able to put our own twist on it a little bit. And I think that's really exciting. That seems to be something that, if there was an Ehren Cruz middle school or an Ehren Cruz elementary school, that they would be teaching there. I love it, man.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. Reinventing the how, looking at innovation and radical creativity as your engine to growth. You know, if you tell somebody, if you put them in these opportunities to be like, well, what skills do you actually love and have an affinity toward? You know, Montessori does some of this to a degree, but
Sure.
you know, it's even taking it to the next level. It's like, well, what do you have an affinity of? Ooh, what really, you know, what do you feel like there's gravity for and you love? Ooh, let's surround you with opportunities to express that, and you then inform us how that feels and like different ways. I think that that's the kind of envisioning that I think is going to be necessary, but even in an adult sense, you know, and that's half the clients are coming to me is like, look, I have passions, I have purpose. Nothing I'm doing in life has to do with any of that, but I can't figure out how to get from over here to over here, or at least making these roads come closer because it's eating my existence away. I'm going in, I'm punching a clock. What I'm doing is not even the job is not even ethical. There's nothing there that fulfills my purpose. And like, I've got these things that I like to do, that I'm awesome at, and and everybody's telling me they're not valuable. Is that true? Like, is that reality? Because wow, that's sad, you know. And I agree. And it's like, that's part of the thing is like, how can we have people trust in their own innate creative true sense coming forward, and make sure that they know that's valuable. Not only that's valuable, that's going to drive us forward. We need you. We need all of you to come out and show us new ways to do this life thing together collectively. And often it takes that radical break out of the contemporary norm. Psychedelics are good facilitators of that.
Yeah, it's, you know, a question I ask myself sometimes, and I think that gets me and a lot of people that try to make the transition from UPS driver to podcaster, or bank executive to facilitator, or lawyer to integration coach, is like, we're already programmed with this false idea of how do I monetize this? Like, and I think as soon as you start doing that, you begin to regress into the last world you came from. Like, yeah, I think that the only way to monetize something is to outgrow the idea of monetizing something. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. That is so well put. Absolutely. I mean, when I came in as a harm reduction coach, this didn't exist as a profession. Like several years ago, this wasn't even a thing. Like, even Tills Talk people like, really? That's legal? It's like, yeah, actually, yeah. If I don't provide compound, people support their own compound. I could frame and create and craft every facet of that experience. And they have made the risk assessment to them that it's important enough for them that they're going to make a choice to acquire compound. Yes, I definitely test it and make sure that it's safe and everything they're working with, you know, as part of the harm reduction protocol. But at the same time, that's how I'm able to be of service in this really direct fashion in this contemporary time until things kind of shift and change. But like, that's really, if I thought in the beginning, is like, wait, this doesn't exist, or this isn't, I can't do this. Sorry, guys, I'm packing up. Like, you know, or you know, and a lot of people do, and I understand that. But at the same time, it's like, hey, look, like, we have to trust that if you are learning and growing and synthesizing what you really want to do in an earnest way, and that doesn't mean like pitch all your other job and just dive right into it. Build those bridges, so, you know, work that network, start solidifying your process, live your process. Anything I've ever done as a coach, I've done the entire program myself and pressure tested or offered it to those that I care about for very reduced rates. Be like, hey, I want to make sure there's integrity here. I want to make sure there's value and all these things. As you go through that whole process of distillation, the universe supports these things. I mean, it just does. It's like, hey, wait a second. Here's another cool opportunity. Here's a great podcast as a brother that just loved what you shared. Like, you know, these things happen, and none of it's by me like orchestrating and all, or even expecting that it's going to happen. It's because I'm earnest and I'm really devoted to my own cultivation process. And then the cups are matching the energy that I'm holding and increasing as I go. And that's part of that rhythm of intuitive guidance or servant leadership, as opposed to having the whole strategy and plan mapped.
I love it. We're such on the same level. You know, it almost brings us back to the idea of faith, and maybe that even is not it doesn't thoroughly hold the thing that I'm trying to explain. It's not a perfect container, but it's close. Yeah. Once you begin moving down the pathway, you do see doors open. And, you know, I have it right here, actually. So this is a quote that I keep by me all the time. And I think it rings true to what we're talking about. And it says, in oneself lies the whole world. And if you know how to look and learn, then the door is there and the key is in your hand. Nobody on earth can give you either that key or the door to open except yourself. And that's from Krishnamurti. Like it's, and the more you start, the more you embrace. Another great quote is from Alfred North Whitehead, who says that, it's God, I'm gonna butcher it now that I'm trying to say it. It's like mysticism, clarification, action. And it's so true. Just those three things. Like you have this mystical experience and then you integrate it. You have the clarification and then you can move towards it. And we do that unconsciously. But once you begin to do it consciously, then you can really begin to move down the path of passion that was meant for you. And the doors will open because you found the key. You may not know you have it in your hand, but all of a sudden you're just like, oh, what does this do? And boom, there's Ehren Cruz over there. Hey, here's Dr. Jessica Rothschild. Here's Dr. Rick Strassman. Like, dude, how did I open that door, man? I don't know, but it's there. If you just have the power to believe in yourself, and it's just one step at first, right? Just get up and try one thing. And don't come off the path, man. If you need to sit down for a minute, sit down. But get up and keep walking on that path, and I promise you, it'll pave its own way, man. It's so beautiful. And I love the way you put it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you, George. You just really nailed it right there too, man. That is so true. It's the earnest nature of honoring the gravity that's drawing you forward and just trusting that there's something important there. There's something to that fire. And, I always find faith for me is like, faith is that space where your soul feels a resonance that your mind can't understand,
Wow, that's
because
good.
now your soul it's a unified being.
Yeah.
So you could feel a unified force and frequency in the soul of there's something there. There's a gravity there. There's something holding that space. But the mind being inherently polarized, that's its CPU. That's where it works from. It can't absorb or understand anything that moves beyond a rationale of cause and effect. So it's not going to be able to shift into that where that field of awareness is, where your soul holds, so that's where that kind of deeper question moves upward. But in that place for me, it's always in a position of, can I trust in that resonance? And then can I also then honor that there will be practical skills that need to be learned, and there will be things that need to be adhered to, and experiences and accountability and responsibility. All those things to go out the window, but there's just a deeper openness to, I'm also evolving into something novel, and I'm also transforming in continuity. And I'm coming at the universe and the world with paintbrushes in my hand, not hammers and nails, not right angles everywhere. No, I'm going to Bob Ross it, I got a little streak over here. Oh, let's smudge that back into a mountain. That's perfect. There we go. And trusting in the ability to adapt and shift and change and audible and all these different things. But if the movement, as you say, moves forward, and you're going through in a pace that honors your own fire and of intent, it does create conditions that are going to be beneficial in your favor and supportive in your favor. And at the end of the day, that's a path that takes great trust. And it also, where I feel like happens in a psychedelic experience, when you have that lived experience, which you talked about, it creates an imprint. That imprint is a signature in the self. That signature, then, even if it fades, it's there. When you're meditating, you know where you're going to. When you're praying, you know where you're praying to. When you're moving in alignment with something that's true to your heart, you know where you're headed. You know where you're headed and feel. You might not know what's going to be cultivated at the end of the day, what that's going to materialize into. And you're not even as concerned, to tell you the truth, because you're starting to live from a place of appreciating the process and learning how to live in alignment. Alignment feels really powerful and profound when you're actually where you want to be, and who you are is aligned with your truth. It's like, and so there's that trust that develops. But that's where I feel like it's helpful with the immersive experiences. Now you have a signature in the self. Now you understand where you're headed and a feel of what that is, a real visceral energy of what that is. So walk the path and trust that where it is. And if you're off and you're wonky, you'll know it too. You can't unknow what you know. Like, oof, that's dissonant. You can choose to learn those lessons or live in fear, because often they're fear-oriented lessons, or choose fear. But if you choose trust, then that's different. That's the other frequency.
That's a great point to bring up fear. It almost seems that the majority of the lives, well, that's not really well said. It seems to me a big part of mental illness that people are dealing with today is a sort of symptom of fear. Like I was so fearful for so long about being my authentic self. I was so fearful for so long about standing up for myself, or not being able to provide, or, all these things that especially a guy has. It's like, man, if I do that, how am I going to provide for my family? And, it's this really internal struggle that so many of us go to. And if you don't deal with it, it manifests in depression, it manifests in anxiety. But if you just stand up against it, I think people will find fear is afraid of you, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Ah, man, that's so well said, George. I mean, because you look at fear and how that controls so many people's
God.
lives, on so many levels. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what we hear in the news. It's what the aunt wants to call and dump dirty laundry on. COVID-19, like war, like all these things is fear in every expression of it. And fear constricts.
Yeah.
Fear brings you tight. It confines the view. It makes you want to hunker away. It makes you want to isolate. Everything, the opposite of love, I feel, is fear more so than hate. At least there's passion. At least there's fire and care and hate. Like something there. Like you got something there. But like if fear is like it's disconnection, it's disassociation, it's isolation. It's literally trying to remove yourself from the stream of life for a false sense of safety. When anything else does that, it atrophies, it decays, it stagnates. Anything that isolates, no matter what substance, it goes spoiled when it's by itself. When it hides, when it moves into a container for I don't care how many years, it's going to go bad at some point. So you look at that and you say, then why do I do that with my own life? Why do I create these bigger boundaries and not allow people to see the true me and get all these things to protect myself and all those elements, when anything in nature that does that fails? And so that energy of the fear, that energy of pushing away, that is unfortunately part of a psyche wound that has been materialized in our collective society for many generations, thousands of years even, I would say. But looking at where we are now, we're recognizing that fear has driven us into a corner. And at this point, you either bark out and strike into somewhere, become a warrior. There's this great TED talk called From the Worrier to the Warrior. They're like, people that judge things on assumed fears. I won't go outside because this might happen. This woman did like, you might have to check it out. And people
I'm
might
going to write it down.
This woman did a statistical analysis. Like there's like a 0.08% chance that what you're worrying about is actually going to happen. Do we live any of our life like that? There's a 0.8% chance that I'm going to crash my car. I'm not going. Like, no. So what you fear that holds you back is often an assumed fear that has such an intangible possibility that really overcoming that and just choosing your inner ability to learn, to grow, to have resilience, it can change everything. And all it takes is a first step to start that reprogramming. Oh, that didn't happen the way I thought it was. Maybe I can reconsider these adventures in my life and start experiencing things.
Ehren, I feel like the time has flown by, man. And I really thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. It exceeded all my expectations. I love what you're doing. Everybody should go and check out what he's doing. It's remarkable. It is healing. It's fun. It's original. It's all those things combined into once. And he's clearly a really passionate person and cares about people. So Ehren, I'm going to have you come back because I feel like we could talk a lot longer and we could have maybe some more people involved. It'd be really fun. But before I let you go, where can people find you? What do you got coming up and what are you excited about?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, George. It's been an absolute pleasure. When you reached out initially and I saw the level of integrity of the people you've hosted on the show, I was like, oh, wow. Like, I was really humbled and honored, so thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Love where we're driven it here. Well, if anyone wants to learn about my work, I'm at thesparc.co. So it's THESPARC.co. Right now, I've got a lot of really exciting things going on. I'm building a community center right here on our property in Asheville, North Carolina. It'll be able to lodge 12 individuals or 12 families, with beautiful facilities, multiple, bathrooms, restrooms, all this, like everything there, epicenter for ceremonial work, epicenter for getting together, exploring ideas, facilitation of different forms. We're on 11 acres, beautiful landscape out here. So really starting to engender a community culture out here right at the home front, which I love. Is coming up here as well. I'm part of I just got on the board with the Pearl Psychedelic Institute. They're out here in Waynesville. They're one of only 3 facilities in the entire country that are currently doing MDMA, a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So they're pioneers on the cutting edge and old wizards in their own right. I have a lot of respect and love for them. They're going to be hosting also kind of events and symposiums here in the Asheville, North Carolina area, trying to build conferences, trying to build the type of congregation of people coming together in this space. And ultimately for my own work, I'm just I'm facilitating one-on-ones, groups, experiences, different things like that. But I'm really just excited about being a part of the now professional conversation, the integrity and ethics behind ceremonial facilitation, how important that is. I mean, we really got to get this right, because if we go out there and we start creating these containers and situations occur that are unsafe, unethical, unbalanced, for caring for people deeply in these states, then it's going to be all white coats and therapists. And maybe it should be if we can't get that right. So I think in part of this is also now wanting to experience and explore and converse about how to create containers, festivals, events, how to create experiences one-on-one that are safe and honoring of the gravity of this, but also use non-traditional magic, medicine, and mysticisms to make this an experience for others. So George, I really appreciate the opportunity to share. And, I do, I'd love to come back on and dive into some new phenomena, see what we can create together.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, hang on one second, Ehren. I'm going to hang up with these guys, but I'll talk to you for one quick second afterwards. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Check out all of the cool links in the show notes. And that's all we got for today. Aloha.